in this episode of the Critical Oxygen Podcast. Eventually, you're going to have to focus on form. Form allows you to build volume and stay consistent with things. And the better off your form is, the more efficient you're going to be in whatever movement it is. And that's going to improve your performance and potentially reduce your risk of injury and other things like that. So I always urge people to get an idea, do a run form analysis or a gait analysis, do a proper bike fit, and see how that's working for you. Do proper swimming form analysis and other things like that, because there's always things that you can do that maybe you can do slight tweaks that will again allow you to stay consistent and do more of that work, because ultimately, continued volume over time is what's going to dictate your ability to do, any sort of endurance work. Welcome to the Critical Oxygen Podcast, where we help you optimize your physiology and maximize your endurance potential. I'm your host, Phil Batterson. I have a PhD in molecular exercise physiology, and I'm the founder of Critical Oxygen, where my mission is to build better endurance athletes through remote education and in-person physiological testing. In today's episode, I'm joined once again by Coach Aaron Geiser from EndurIQ, where we are going to talk all about how to improve your swim if you're a swimmer or if you're a triathlete. Now, if you are not a swimmer or a triathlete, this is still going to be a great episode for you, because within this episode, we talk about the importance of looking at form. So whether that's running form, cycling form, or swimming form, and how small changes to your economy of motion and mechanics can lead to great or large performance outcomes. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Coach Aaron Geiser, all about how to improve your swim if you're a triathlete. Enjoy. Aaron Geiser, welcome back to the show.
How's it going, Phil?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's an exciting day because I think we have a first here of a topic we haven't talked about yet. So it's a little exciting.
Yeah. It's something that we realized, I think, that we hadn't touched on before. And what's going to be really fun about this is that I think even people who do not do this activity will gain, at least some sort of insight from, for how to train, how to improve your endurance, other things like that, just by listening to, what's that? Well, that's why I'm trying to build the intrigue. I'm trying to build the intrigue here. The topic that we are going to touch on today is swimming and how to get better at swimming. Because I think, if you don't have a swimming background, swimming can be one of the most challenging things to get better at in terms of endurance sport if you're training for triathlons. I know for myself, when I first got into triathlon and all of that, I had swam maybe 3 laps in a pool, max. And the first thing I did was I was sent, like an Ironman training plan, and it was like, yeah, just get in the pool. And I was just like, I'm going to get in the pool and I'm just going to swim. And somebody told me early on, they're like, yeah, runners have a tendency to sink because we're just the way that, running works compared to swimming. And that was my experience. So I recruited one of my fraternity brothers at the time who had swam in high school. And I was like, Billy, you gotta come with me to the pool, and you gotta at least give me some tips on how to swim, just a little bit better. And admittedly, I probably could have spent a lot more time working with him on my form and other things like that. But something you were telling me offline, Aaron, is that in order to get better at swimming, because a lot of people have not done it very often, the number one key to getting better at swimming, and I'm just going to spoil it within the first 2 minutes here, is working on your form and getting more efficient at, with your swim stroke.
Now that we've lost 30% of our listening base, you just gave that piece of information. No, it really, one of the things that I've found through coaching, and it kind of came up fairly quickly when I would start to prescribe swim workouts. a lot of athletes were like, hey, this is a lot better. Like, what? So talking with athletes through that process, like, why is it better than, like, what were you doing? And I think so many triathletes get into the sport. They're not from a swimming background, but even if they are, I think so many people look at the number. They look at, okay, I got to swim 1900 meters. I got to swim 3,800 meters. I got to swim 1,500 meters, whatever their distance of swimming in the event is. They look at that as their target, and then they just work consistently with they just progress to that number. They don't break up sets. They don't focus on certain things to break it apart. And all they end up doing is, one, reconditioning poor form because they didn't probably have good form in the first place, because it's just a foreign substance to anybody that didn't spend any time there.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, you would end up doing this long marathon reps. Your body would get tired. You would end up probably creating more poor form technique, like just because you're recruiting other muscle groups, you're not grabbing the water properly. So therefore you're then conditioning even worse form. Mm-hmm. And then people look at the end of the day and say, well, I can swim this far, but man, it is slow and it gets slower as I go. So really, and I think it's always defeating for somebody that's really put the swimming 3 or 4 or even 5 times a week, and then they have this individual that looks completely out of shape hop into the lane next to them and just toast them. Mm-hmm. And it's just because that person probably had some form of swim background. They're not in shape, or what you would consider shape, compared to yourself, and then you just get dusted because this person just has good, what we look for, hydrodynamics, and it's they're moving through the water more efficiently with good form, and that's what the biggest difference is. And I think so many triathletes think, because if you bike more, you run more, you typically get faster in both of those cases, or it gets a little bit easier. Swimming, if you swim more, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get faster. It might guarantee that you can go the distance and have the confidence to go the distance, but it's not a guarantee that that's what's going to make you faster. And from all those conversations, I've figured out, well, okay, we need to start most people in a very, we have to start them with drills. We have to start with smaller sets, and we then really build that muscle memory. Then go to that next step. Start to build that muscle memory at that slightly longer. But don't throw in, okay, well, I've just been doing a bunch of 50s, or I've just been doing a bunch of 100s. It's now to start doing 500s or 800. No. We need to probably have one workout dedicated to keeping that speed, but speed with good form, and then just start to build onto a 100 to a 150, a 200, but then making sure that you continue to keep that good form for that is what's going to it's what's going to provide the biggest gain and the biggest bang for your buck.
Yeah, it's I think this is where people get a little bit confused and challenged by swimming, is because you can build more volume and become a better runner by just simply building more volume and just running more, or by cycling more, because cycling, let's be honest, it's not very complicated movement, right? You push the pedals down, and if you do get a pedal stroke analysis, right, you want to be engaging the entire pedal stroke, but even then, you can get away with a lot without having perfect, cycling form. Running, a little bit more complicated, right? Because you're moving the entire body in 3D plane of movement. But even then, you see the gambit of people with different running forms and other things like that who have been pretty successful. Mm-hmm. And I think you can get away with, having, a little bit poorer running form, Obviously, you can make gains in efficiency if you have better running form. But I think with swimming, because it is not necessarily what humans were designed to do, we are bipedal and we use our legs, not our arms, for most of our movement. So this is where form and, just like proper hydrodynamics and efficiency come into play. And we did talk about this, because I think one of the first episodes I was like, what do you think the most important thing, for say swimming or running or, cycling is? And you were like, absolutely, in swimming, it's being more efficient. It's being able to get through the water as efficiently as possible. Because you could be a fairly fast swimmer, but if you're absolutely, if you're not efficiently moving through the water, then there's so much energy you're wasting, especially in long course triathlon, where if you get to the end of that swim and it's like, 55 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes, whatever it is, and you're just absolutely gassed, you're in for a real bad day. I'll tell you that. So if I were to go back and, and know what I know now, I would have spent probably, the first, I don't even know how long, however long it would take me to actually get good with my proper form. And then I would start to progress my volume and everything. And this is what I normally recommend to people is, establish proper form by having a coach who can actually watch you on the pool deck. That would be, probably like the number one thing. Videotaping yourself, which I think you've recommended to me before. And when we were doing testing, you had somebody with a GoPro following you, underwater, above the water, front and back, just to see how everything was going. And then send that to a reputable coach. And then also, I think something that I had invested in was just like a proper swim form, DVD set, or, this is before, like a lot of the YouTube videos and stuff out there now. And you're grinning. So do you have opinions on that? Because I imagine it's really hard if you don't have any feedback, visual feedback for yourself. You're probably thinking that you're bringing your elbow up high and it's just flopping in the water, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where nothing beats recording yourself. And even if you have a coach on pool deck, I still think recording is good, because then you can see, or that coach can show you, this is what you're doing. And so many times, that's not what it felt like. No way. That's not me. That was the person next to me.
Yeah.
I mean, so again, I was smiling because I have so many individuals that you talk to that, I've learned how to, and this is how I got started. I learned how to swim through videos on YouTube. Mm-hmm. But you know what? Those people can swim. Like when at certain points you look at it and you're like, man, I know I can go faster. But if you don't know what your deficiency is, you don't know what to target. So again, one of the things that I've really learned the most in the past couple of years is that we can give all kinds of drills. We can throw all kinds of drills to any swimmer. But maybe you're throwing drills to something that you're already good at. Mm-hmm. And that's not going to help you. But you have these other 5 deficiencies that we should be working on. But I'm giving you sculling drills or something else that your catch is in good shape, so you don't need the sculling drill. You need maybe a more efficient kick, or you need a more efficient entry into the water or propulsion phase. I mean, there's so many different parts of the swim stroke, so that you can watch video till you're blue in the face, and you're going to get into the water and you're going to think you're doing that. And you're still going to walk out of that session super frustrated because you were still not very fast, or you were the same speed you were the day before, and the day before that, and the week before that. Or in some cases, you might be getting slower because of that thing that we talked about earlier, where you're doing too large of a set. You're reconditioning even worse bad habits because you're under fatigued scenario. And then you're going in and doing some of these short work under that new form that is less efficient than you were in the first place. So that person's getting slower. So I just think videotaping in all instances is going to be the top priority, and it's going to be your best line to improving, because you're going to physically see what you're doing wrong, and then having the right person to diagnose that, then prescribe drills that are going to help you overcome those deficiencies. And it really is about, as you said, hydrodynamics. And it's not about putting in 5,000 yards when you started it. Man, I was struggling. I swam 25 yards or whatever it was. If you got to 5,000, great. But are you moving through the water like a turtle, or are you sliding through that water more efficient? So I really do think that it is about video. It is about getting your deficiencies diagnosed and then actually specifically having drills that work on those deficiencies, and then driving those skills that you are getting from the drills and inputting them into your shorter sets. Make them reconditioned. Make that, if you want to use the words muscle memory, recondition that. Then as that starts to be conditioned for short distance, then we start to evolve it to longer distances. But again, we need to make sure that we're videotaping those, because more likely when you go in, when you're making that jump, maybe from a 100 set to a 200 set, maybe you're getting tired on after 175, and that final 25 is still coming back, and the form is not what you think it is. It feels like you're doing what you did the first 175, but the final 25 are not. So getting that video, even when you're in a tired state, is super important, because then you're going to see and know what the deficiency is and where that deficiency starts to occur, and then you can work against that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will say too, like, reprogramming your swim stroke is a lot easier in the beginning if you haven't, done a ton of volume, because you don't have that quote unquote muscle memory necessarily ingrained that has those bad habits. And if you do start to exercise and do anything under fatigue, your body defaults to the movement patterns that it's, been previously programmed to. So, if you're not consciously thinking about something every single stroke, then you're just going to default back to, what your body has established over time.
And I don't even know if it's thinking about it per se, just because poor swimmers often think too much. You're thinking of like, where my hands coming in, is my elbow, like all of these things you're often thinking about, 10 to 15 things. I mean, even if you're going into a run workout, okay, I'm working on my cadence, or I'm working on where my foot strike is, or I'm trying to open up the back of my run gait. You typically go on with just like one or two things, maybe, and then you just do the activity. You get somebody in the swim motion and they're thinking about every, like 7 to 10 things. You can't juggle that. So it's almost how I work with my athletes is let's focus on, when we go into this rep or when we go into this drill set, this drill might fix 2 or 3 other things. So let's focus on just that one thing. Let that one thing then create balance with those 2 other things. And we've corrected 3 things in that case, but you've only focused on one thing. So it's really about attacking a drill with the specific focus of what that one thing is. Don't take a entry drill into a rotation drill, or like just focus on the 1 or 2 things that you need to be focusing on that drill.
But that's what makes a good coach a good coach, is that they can distill it down and they can identify like the one thing you should be focusing on. Because it's like, because my default was, right, it's like, okay, well, I gotta, focus on hand entry and rotation and okay, don't breathe for 3 strokes, and then, make sure you're kicking hard enough and all this other stuff, right? But if I would have had a coach, or I would have had, an individual there watching me, they could have said, okay, like there's a lot of shit going on, with your stroke that we eventually need to fix. However, I think that the number one thing that you should just focus on for this next 50 meters is this. It's the same thing with like, this is what's beneficial about having, like a good personal trainer. If you're just learning strength exercises, is they can give you one thing to focus on. Like, like during a squat, push your butt back, like keep your shoulders or keep your chest up, like other things like that, that make it so that one movement now you're just focusing on like the one thing you want to actually accomplish here. And then that's going to potentially fix multiple different things. But again, if you never video yourself swimming, if you don't know how you're actually moving through the water, objectively speaking, like, all of us think we have perfect swim form, perfect run form, all that sort of stuff. But if you never actually get it analyzed, then that's where I think, like you run into issues with actually improving. So no, I really like that. And, you were saying, you were like, it's like if you actually looked at the Ironman, training plan that I was following, it was this thing that was like printed in a binder, and it was like, okay, you're going to do, like 100 meters of kicking, then, 100 meters of pulling, and then you're going to work on this, and then you're going to work on this. And now you're going to go into your working set, which is like, 1,000 meters straight, or, something along those lines. And for me, because I was a beginner and I had no idea what the hell I was doing, it would have been much more efficient and better in the long term if I would have just, got my buddy Billy, just to come to the pool with me, for a month and just be like, tell me what I'm doing wrong and what I need to focus on. Because, even though I'm not technically building, fitness via volume for that swim, everything we've discussed already, I actually probably was working in the face of that. And by spending that month, 2 months, developing my form and keeping volume low, that and slowly building up over time, I would have actually ingrained really, really positive, swim form and other things like that, and gone from there's a huge potential to save time in the water, right? You could go from 2 minutes per 100 to like a minute 40, just by switching your stroke and getting better and more efficient in the water.
Well, but I also think it again is the mindset of a type A personality that if they think that they're working on the small things, that it's not actually working towards the bigger picture. And sometimes we do just get very, very tunnel visioned. But one thing I want to remind everybody out there that is a triathlete, when you're swimming and you're biking and you're running, you're always conditioning your aerobic function.
Yes.
So
yes.
It's not like when you go into, when you've hit that point of starting to get longer sets, it's not in, if your breath timing is on point, which again is a focus on technique, when you get that matched up, you'll be able to go for days anyways. And then it's just repeating that movement over and over again. So you're exactly right, where in the early stages you can see a newly adaptive swimmer shave off a large amount of time because it's more, they're just getting that hydrodynamic aspect. They're moving through the water more efficiently. The limitation is not going to often be your lungs and your ability to breathe in that case. It's about, let's get the right timing on breath, and then you can just continue to go for long periods of time, because again, you're constantly working that on the run and the bike aspect of things. Now what we're doing is we're moving in a dense like muscle, like it does take muscle to move yourself through the water. You have to, I mean, of course, you're going to do it more efficiently through quality technique and movement, but it is a little bit more of a muscular fatigue that sets in swimming than breathing fatigue. Where breathing fatigue typically comes in is truly your timing of your breath is off.
Mm-hmm.
So getting again that technique, getting the strength aspect and the endurance from the strength component is going to be that first level of where you want to really get things dialed in, along with the breath timing. And then you're going to find that, man, I can go these longer periods of time through these longer sets because I'm breathing at the right time. My body's not getting fatigued, so my form's not going to crap, and I can just roll along for longer periods of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's if I, got a complete beginner in really any sport, I think, it's like in basketball, right? If you get a beginner in basketball, you don't teach them, how to do a windmill dunk, right? You teach them how to lay up, you teach them how to dribble, you teach them all the fundamentals and the basics of it. It's the same thing with endurance sports as well, right? Like a lot of people haven't been taught how to properly run. And I'm sure if you're a seasoned, coach or an athlete and you see people who are new to running, you can be like, yeah, that person just started running. Same thing with swimming. And I mean, I think even to a greater extent, just because, swimming is so foreign to a lot of us. So again, like just to double and triple down, it's like you need to start with introduction of proper form. And I think that comes with, proper form. And then I think, after you start to get proper form, then building frequency. So for most of my athletes, I love if people can get in the pool as many times per week as possible. That is just because, again, you're trying to ingrain that movement pattern. And by doing the frequency, you're limiting the amount of fatigue you're building up, ideally. And, so you're able to maintain high quality sessions each time you go in. And then from there, you could start to build, volume, however you want to actually do it.
Well, and I feel that it helps overall because one, it stimulates the lymph system. Two, it's a non-impact workout, so it's not going to beat your body up the same way. And it's due to the strength component, you're gonna end up kind of building another neuromuscular endurance aspect of movement.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you 100%. And I feel like, especially from the lymph system aspect, I just think it's a good circulator after, man, I kicked my tail off on that VO2 max run yesterday. Mm-hmm. Man, nothing feels good but getting into that water and just kicking your feet a little bit. Oh man, I got out. I feel a lot better than when I walked in. It's a big improvement. So therefore, if you have another workout later that day, it's going to make it a heck of a lot easier to accomplish and have a good session in that second workout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's also, like really good points is perhaps, especially in the beginning, right? When you're just learning your swimming and everything, like your swim sessions could really be actually facilitating recovery, because you simply aren't, stressing the cardiovascular system and the pulmonary system as much, in the muscular system as much as you would be if, you are to the point where you're an advanced swimmer that's doing really, really hard sets and other things like that. So there's nothing wrong with that. I think just change the mindset and be like, look, this is going to pay dividends in the long run. And it's going to pay dividends right now because it really is helping me, to recover, move more, just move the body, move the blood, get more nutrients to the muscle for repair. And while you may not specifically be adapting the cardiovascular system to get tons and tons of blood and oxygen to, say, the arms when you're cycling or running, you're still building a very robust cardiovascular system, which is important for endurance. And ultimately, when you do start to go then build that volume with the swim, your body will have the cardiovascular system to support that. And then it'll just have to lay down, like capillaries and a little bit more mitochondrial volume density and other things like that in order to get you to that next level, in terms of your swim fitness. So, and again, it comes down kind of like to basics of it, right? So now if we assume that somebody has, established good form, what is your next approach? Like, for me, the first thing I think about is, consistency, specificity, and then progression, right? Is, how do you go about building, like that volume with people? Do you prefer to build in those longer sets? I think the answer is no. Or do you prefer to break them up and then build, fitness via that way?
And that's a heck of a question. And as we always say, it does depend. But really how I like to do it is, one, break up the sets. I mean, you can still create a great deal of development by, okay, I want to swim 1,800 yards or meters, breaking that down into 200s with shorter rest, or breaking it into a couple of 400s with a little bit shorter rest. But that rest allows you and your body to get back into a rhythm and not get so fatigued that we start to create negative movement principles in the water. And typically, it's not bad to have a long set every now and again. It's good. It will be mentally refreshing to know, all right, when it comes to race day, I am ready to go that distance because I can do it in this environment. Mm-hmm. But it's not something that should be on the schedule on a regular basis, for the point that you're more likely going to have fatigue set in halfway through that set. You're going to then start to trail back to negative movement patterns, which is then going to start to lose speed. And it's again, we can build up that same 1,900 yard distance with just shorten a rest break and get back into the next rep. And I think that's where you just have that progression of, okay, where do I want to accomplish and where do I want to move the needle? So early on, yes, we want to recondition. So it's more, your distance is made up of shorter reps. Mm-hmm. Then we move to shorter reps, shorter recoveries. Mm-hmm. Then we start to move to longer reps, longer recoveries. Longer reps, shorter recoveries. And we just continue to move. So it kind of progresses and evolves, Phil, over how you are starting to break down. So recognizing, man, I start to feel fatigued, or I start to feel the form go at 200. Okay, well, let's do 200s. Get confident and quality reps at 200s with the longer breaks. Okay, I'm starting to hold the 200 towards the end of this these reps. Let's start to decrease that. Let's start to decrease the rest rep. And then when that starts to feel good and you're holding that same form towards the back portion of all those reps, okay, let's move it up to a 300 or a 400. Yes, it takes time. But again, if you're looking at long-term performance in the sport, who cares if, like 2 weeks ago, you could swim 1,800 meters slow, if you could swim 1,800 meters in 4 weeks much faster, you're going to be more happy. So it's one of those things where if you're looking at doing this sport and just doing it one time and getting the heck out, okay, get your sets, like just get from A to B. Mm-hmm. Who cares? But if you're looking at being in the sport for a long period of time, learn how to block and tackle and that's going to open up the run and pass game later. So do the small stuff today. Therefore, it's going to open up some ability to really get faster down the road and be able to hold that speed for longer periods of time. And that's what's going to end up allowing you to fully gain speed and time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, I mean, this is something that you and I have talked about numerous times on the podcast, but it's like when we talk about progression doesn't have to be going from 100 meters to 200 meters the next week, 200 meters to 300 meters the next week. It could be as simple as going from 100, doing 100 meters this week and then 100 meters the next week, and you're slightly faster with the same rest periods. Like it's the same principles of aerobic development apply, you know, across the board for, you know, running, biking, and swimming. I think swimming is just one of those things where it's actually could be detrimental, especially in the beginning, to try to build more volume, because you just simply can't get away with it in terms of an efficiency standpoint, and the breakdown is much quicker. In terms of like the risk of injury is probably lower because you're not weight bearing, but the breakdown in form is so much more drastic. You could go from, you know, swimming 140s, you know, per 100 fresh to 230s if you get too tired or something along those lines. And I don't know if it's that drastic, but it's pretty drastic. Whereas like running, right, you know, it's like if you go out and you do like a quote unquote steady state run, then you should be able to maintain whatever pace it is for extended periods of time. But again, you build that up over time. And, you know, so it's just interesting how, you know, all of the same principles apply. But you just have to but it's just more evident with swimming. And I will say too, it's like swimming is one of those things where reps are much more common than just continuous movement. And I wonder if we could learn something in terms of like running or cycling by doing like more rep style sort of things to build volume, where you say, and you do this a little bit, I think, with like introduction of like specific work and threshold work and other things like that, where you say, okay, well, we're going to do, you know, a minute on, 30 seconds off at what we want to do threshold pace. And then we're going to build up slowly in volume and other things like that from there. But yeah,
I mean, there's so many things that are involved in this, and I think part of what you said about, and I think so many athletes just avoid putting the time in the water, is because they've made it an unenjoyable allotment of time. And I do also feel that adding reps and sets and breaking everything up just provides enough mental stimulation too, because I mean, you're in water, you're watching a line go constant. And so it's really by setting up those breaks, it just allows you to break the monotony of the movement as well, and you might end up enjoying that process. And I think that goes back to one of my earlier comments, when I get new athletes and they've done it their way for these long marathon reps, and then they come in and get things broken up. Like, man, it's a lot more enjoyable. Okay, well, let's learn from that. So don't feel like you have to just put these, like, it doesn't always just have to be about constant work. It can be focused repetitions, shorter in length, that get you, and they're going to get you from A to B. And that's ultimately what you're trying to accomplish. So I guess my point is just try to add the fun back into the movement.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly what you talked about with indoor training too, right? You know, you guys, and you specifically were saying that you like to, even during like say zone 2, right? You know, if you're running on a treadmill or biking or whatever it is, you like to add, you know, like, okay, maybe a little bit above, you know, your zone 2 area, then below it. And I think what that does is it keeps people engaged, because they have to know when things are changing, especially in the pool, right? Because in the pool, you're not watching, you know, Zwift, and it's not automatically controlling your pace and when to go and other things like that. or if you're running on your Peloton treadmill, it's like, it's not controlling your reps and your sets and other things. So you have to know, okay, I got 30 seconds to rest here, and then I'm going to hit it again, or I have a minute and a half to rest, or whatever it is. And you're just, you keep doing that. Right. And it just keeps things more engaging, and you're still getting eventually a lot of work done.
Yeah. Right.
And you're not just for me, the way that I did it, I just go into the pool and I just swim straight, whatever the volume was, any given day. All the stuff you're saying is like the shit I did not do when I was training for my Ironman and stuff. And I think that is one of the reasons why I just didn't have a good relationship with swimming, is because I never implemented any of these. Like, I never felt accomplished in terms of being fast in the water, because I never focused on, building my swim form early on in the cycle. I never, then progressed slowly. I was just like, yep, it's time to swim 1,000 meters today. Okay, got to do 1,200 the next week, other things like that. And it just got super miserable. And I never broke things up, because I was like, well, if I'm going to be swimming, 2.4 miles in the water during my race, then I might as well try to build up to 2.4 miles. So then I switched from indoor swimming, which was like 25 yards. And then in the summer, it was 50 yard pool or 50 meter pool or something like that. And holy shit, that was like the worst decision, because it was just like, oh my God, when is the edge of the pool coming? And I'm sure that other people have done the same thing that I have. So I hope, at least from this perspective, people will rethink, and maybe you're somebody who's like, oh, I think I have good swim form. I've been swimming for a while now, and other things like that. My first thing would still be to recommend go get a coach who will videotape you, and at least just like take a look at your form, and then maybe recalibrate your form from there, and do a little, take it back a little bit. You can always reduce the volume a little to get your swim form back up. And then, the gains from having better swim form are going to be monumental compared to those minor gains that you would be making from improvements in fitness.
Well, and another thing to add on to that, not everybody has a swim coach at the place that they swim, or in their area that's going to fit with them. You will be surprised at getting videotape yourself. So a tripod on the side of or on the end of the lane, or on the side of the lane, getting you in focus and getting it to the right person is going to provide you with a great deal of benefit. There are amazing swim coaches out there that can be anywhere in the world, that if you get them that footage, they're going to be able to start to help you. So don't feel like, I don't have anybody in my area that I can rely on. Doesn't matter. Get the video, find somebody out there, get them the video, allow them to break it down, and start to get specificity of drills that are going to help you and move you forward. And I think that that's where recognize, just because you swim where you don't have a coach, or there's not a coach that you've been referred to in your area, there's a lot of coaches out there, and they can do a lot of great work with just some video. And that's why I think video and getting video frequently is super important, because again, when you first see yourself in that video, you're going to be like, did I get the wrong person? Because you're going to think, man, that is not what it feels like. And it looks completely different than what I thought I was doing. And that right there, I'm going to come back. That's the first thing that people need to do, is get video the very first. Like, if you ever step into the water for the first time, just go ahead and get the video the first time. Have either you look at it or compare it to what you saw on your YouTube video and be like, that doesn't look similar.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And even if you haven't, even if you are like a quote unquote seasoned, swimmer, I would still recommend getting somebody to take a look at your form and other things
100%.
like that, because most likely there's things you need to tweak. So, okay, so now we've gotten to the point where we've reiterated good swim form multiple times now, but now we're assuming that somebody has good swim form. They've started to progress in other things like that. How do you start to figure out, say, pacing per 100 and other things like that? Like, where does the critical swim test come in?
So what you want to start to do, and the critical swim speed test is it's a 400 and 200 all out. And really the difference between the two is going to provide you with how much fatigue sets in, and that's going to be part of that particular CSS or critical swim speed.
It's very similar to like a critical power test, and where you use two metrics. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with it, that's really what it's trying to get at.
And what you will do is that's how you start to do your pacing. And I mean, it's set up just like any other pacing from FTP or run pacing or heart rate work. You're trying to feel. So when you go into the water, if it's a threshold effort, you're going a little above what your CSS is, and you're going off a feel. When you're going to CSS, which is kind of your thought of or around race pace, you're just trying to dial in that feel. And you can't look at your watch. You can't look at things when you're swimming to know. I mean, we can go into form swim goggles, but let's just take it from a generic approach. You don't know what, like, you can't see a clock of saying, okay, I want to hit this 25 in 18 seconds. I want to hit this 50 in 36 seconds. I want to hit this 100 in 116 or whatever it might be. So you got to develop that feel. And that's when you just need to kind of dial into when you're in the set and you're getting to that point of working more specific race efforts. You're just trying to get that feel of what that timing is. And then as you get more dialed in with that feel, when you get into the race, you're going to be able to say, this is on point with that race pace, or it's a little bit too much. The problem when it comes into a race also is that when you did your critical swim speed, you did it in a pool. You're not most likely in a triathlon going to be in a pool. Now, there are some that do have pool swims, but for the most part, most triathlons are not going to be in a pool. You have to factor that you're going to be in an open water, whether it be ocean, river, lake. You're going to have a little bit of current. You're going to have a little bit of wind current. You're going to have a little bit of like ocean waves and other things.
And you're going to have people around you.
Exactly. So that's going to change. So what you're really going into that environment in, Phil, is the feel. So the feel that you've been working in the pool, you're just trying to feel that same feel out in the open water. You look at anybody, and this is professionals down to the first timers, their swim speed is different in that event than it is in the pool. So recognize that number might not match up when you get out of the water and you look at your watch or you see what that time clock is when you see or get out of the water. It's more of, did you hit the right feel? And that feel is what we're trying when we progress through the work of a swim development. We want to just dial into that feel. So therefore, when we get into race day, we're hitting that feel and knowing that we're not going too hard, burning too many matches, or we're not going hard enough and not picking up time.
Yeah, I like that, because what's interesting about swimming is that we really don't have the ability to track hardly any physiological metrics or, get any, like we have time, and then the form goggles, right, will give you, your speed and other things like that. But that's still essentially it at this point. So
a lot of people still think that heart rate is correct in the water, whether they are following their watch or whether they're following their heart rate strap. Water's a good conductor. So therefore it's going to get flutters. So if water is getting in between that sensor and your skin, it's not accurate. So You are correct, Phil. And I want to make sure that people recognize that, because I do have a lot of conversations where people are super focused on their heart rate in the water. I'm like, the only thing is if you're actually finger on the jugular getting what your pulse rate is. But the problem is you're using your arms, so you can't do that.
No, you just go to single arm strokes for a little bit while you count your, while you count your heart rate. And another thing too, another limitation to heart rate is that the traditional Bluetooth actually is very, very poor at transmitting signals through the water. It's actually, I can't say it's impossible, but it just does not work very well, just because at the high rate that Bluetooth actually transmits, it doesn't make it through the water very well. So there are some solutions to that I think like Garmin has come out with. But yeah, I really like this. What you're trying to do is you're trying to dial in feel, because that feel is really what's going to dictate your ability to say, I am at something that is sustainable or unsustainable, within this moment. And ultimately, this is really how most people should be, racing and training and other things like that. Easier said than done. Absolutely. But I will say that, it's just a little bit harder in swimming because you don't have the feedback of the heart rate. You have speed, but then like you said, Aaron, when you get to open water, the speed could be completely different, right? It's like if you have a mass start, like talk about one of the most stressful, things that I've ever done in my life. Mass start, people are, kicking all around you. You get kicked in the face a couple times. Someone hits you in the back, like other things like that. So then you have that sort of stress, plus your face is underwater. So it's like, well, if somebody hits me in the head here, like I'm going to drown, so I'm being dramatic, but at the same time, it's stressful. So understanding, like, okay, well, I know that this is not how it feels, when I'm in the pool and I am doing, my critical swim sets are, just under my critical swim speed. So this is not sustainable. So I have to back off, or this feels really easy. Maybe, from an RPE perspective, I can push a little harder. I think ultimately, if people did get to that point, I think that's where what we're looking for, right? In terms of like racing to get the best out of ourselves. Again, that just takes time, and that takes a lot of practice and stuff too. So another question I have, and I think this is probably a good place to maybe wrap up, is when do you start to implement things like open water swimming? And I know this is like, it's highly variable for people. So if it is available, how and when do you start to implement open water and swimming for people? Because again, specificity, the only way you're going to really get better at open water swimming is by doing it.
Yes. And this is a tough answer that not everybody really probably is going to like. And as you know, when I grew up, I played baseball. Baseball is a sport where you need another person typically to be around to do it. Because if you're going to throw, somebody's got to throw that ball back unless you're throwing and running after the ball. So swimming in open water, I don't like when people are not doing it with somebody else or with some type of, you got your swim buoys and other things like that. But I think one, safety is the first thing. One is the water that you're swimming in safe? Is the environment that you're swimming in safe? Do you have other people that you can swim with to make it safer? You got to have it accessible. If you don't have it accessible, it makes it very hard. So again, that individual is up against kind of a rock and a hard place. So they just need to put more time in the pool to get as comfortable as they can and hope for the best when they get into that open form of water. There's not a real time. If you have access to your water or to an open water source, I don't find you can always add drills, maybe stay on the more shallow area. So therefore, if you feel uncomfortable or you need a break, you can stand up. But as far as timing of when to get into the water, how frequently, I mean, if you have access to it, do it as frequently as you need to feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Recognize that you don't, if you get to the point where, man, I'm just going to go out and just swim long distances, again, that kind of falls back into what we were talking about earlier, where it does get a little bit boring and you might be creating some negative responses in your form. So again, make sure that you're in a body of water, you're swimming in a stretch where you can set it up to be the length that you want it to be. So if you want it to be 400 meters and then a break, you swim the 400 meters and you break. Or so it takes a little bit more diagnosis of what do I have available, how I'm going to do this, how frequently I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have the capabilities to swim open water and do it frequently, do it, but still set up many of the things that we've talked about today in getting you to add performance that should still be involved in your open water swimming. You're just measuring in an open body of water instead of a pool. So you're not getting the benefit of pushing off. If you're doing flip turns, you're not doing flip turns and pushing off. So the numbers are going to be more realistic to what you are going to expect in your open water event too.
Yeah. I think, you know, like from what it sounds like is like, you know, the open water is a little bit more of the ideal scenario, but you still need to keep those principles in mind, right? You need
Right.
to build your form first, then progress shorter distances, shorter rest, longer distances, similar rest, longer distance, shorter rest, and, you know, so on and so forth. And I do know just from like experience and talking to people that just like getting into open water can be pretty daunting, you know, for some people. So having an individual with you, obviously, to guarantee your safety first and foremost, because that's the biggest thing that we want to guarantee. And then from there, just getting comfortable, you know, with the open water format. You know, you don't have to go out and you don't have to go, you know, 1,800 meters, right? You know, right off the bat, you can go, you know, 100 meters out, 100 meters back. You get 50 meters out, 50 meters back, right? You can gamify or, you know, make sets for your open water swimming. And that's just going to help you get more comfortable, you know, with open water swimming in general, because it is different, right? You know, you don't generally have swells in a pool. You know, so those are things you have to worry about. You normally don't have to, you know, stick your head out of the water and sight where you're going. You know, so those are other aspects and other techniques that have to be developed. And, you know, again, if you're fortunate enough, like, you know, for example, if you live in Hawaii, like when I was in Hawaii for the Kona Ironman, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many people just like swimming by, you know, just like every morning and stuff like that. It's like, but that's an exception, you know, probably to the rule, right? You know, it's like not many people have access to a nice body of water that is, you know, safe enough for them to swim in. So I will say you can probably get a very, very long way in terms of progressing your swim performance by just doing it in a pool. And then using, you know, like say shorter triathlons or other things like that as practice for that open water swimming, getting used to the starts, doing other things like that.
I agree 100% with that. And really I have some athletes that have been somewhat concerned. I wouldn't say concerned, but hesitant to go into that event and think, oh, well, it's open water. It's a completely full. It's not that different. Recognize that if you're not having to stop in the middle of a 400 or 800 to stand up in the water of your pool, you're probably not going to need that in the event. So recognize that it's not that different. Don't make it bigger than what it is. I think confidence is you're still swimming and you've swam. You're just doing it around other people and there's not that bottom to it, but continue to move your arms, continue to kick, continue to swim and you'll get from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's anything else you want to add about just like the importance of developing swim or anything like that? Because I think we've covered most, if not all, the bases.
I mean, I think I've beaten the dead horse, but when you get started, just recognize you most likely are not going to be looking as you feel in the water.
Mm-hmm.
So take the proper recording needs, get yourself on video and get it looked at, because that's going to, I mean, you're going to be a heck of a lot further off even in 3 weeks if somebody gives you the proper drills, has you start swim, rather than you going that 3 weeks on your own thinking that you're doing everything great and you're the next Michael Phelps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think this is an awesome conversation, Aaron. I hope that, individuals, even if you're not a swimmer, you learned a lot, because I think we can still take a lot of principles away from this, whether it's running, biking, really any endurance sport that you're competing in. It's like eventually you're going to have to focus on form. Form allows you to build volume and stay consistent with things. And the better off your form is, the more efficient you're going to be in whatever movement it is. And that's going to improve your performance and potentially reduce your, risk of injury and other things like that. So I always urge people to get an idea, like, do like a run form analysis or a gait analysis, do, a proper bike fit, and, see how that's, working for you. Do proper swimming, form analysis and other things like that, because there's always things that you can do that, maybe you can do slight tweaks that will, again, allow you to stay consistent and do more of that work, because ultimately, like continued volume over time is what's going to dictate your ability to do, any sort of endurance work. Yeah. If you guys have any questions, drop me a line on Instagram. You can always find me at Critical02. You can find Aaron at Geiser on Instagram. You can comment down below if you're on YouTube. Let us know what was the biggest thing you learned, from this episode. If you want to give us some good feedback, you can always leave feedback on Spotify. Leave us a 5-star review if you've got this far in the podcast. It really helps us out. We hope you guys enjoyed this conversation all about swimming and developing your swim performance, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.